Hi, this is Rod Gels from the Rock Band Program podcast, and I'm here with Jonathan Merkel. Jonathan Merkel, if you didn't see the video, we got his life story on the other video. He's a guitar nerd, metalhead, composer. Actually, to be fair, you're not just a metalhead. You listen to all kinds of music. And composer, producer, engineer. Uh, You learn to do a lot of this on your own, which I respect because I know what you do, and I know
hmm
that all that's involved in it, and the fact that you do the deep dive, self-taught deep dive, and just learn as you go. It's kind of like the ultimate in punk rock. Even though I don't know that you were that big of a punk, but anyway, thank you,
Sure.
Jonathan, for doing this. Let's take
Sure.
you back. Let's for the people that were our audience. You have a history that goes back into the 90s that you started taking guitar lessons. We were just talking about this, that I was his mentor when he was in high school, and it was like I was this old guy and he was this young kid, and it's like we're like 5 years apart.
hmm
So it's not that big of a jump. But so back then you got your first 4 track. When did you
Yeah.
first started recording? Let's trace that history again, because I think we said some of this in our first interview, but
It wasn't too long after I was started taking guitar lesson with you.
and that was you started from scratch.
Started from scratch, definitely.
Okay, so
I had
when
played
I say that, because you jumped into it pretty quickly, the recording.
yeah, I played trumpet before that, but I wasn't really good at that. But yeah, I don't know when I would say I started playing around 10th grade or something, and very quickly I bought a Fostex 4-track recorder and that little drum machine at the time, the Dr. Rhythm.
Okay,
Um,
yeah,
so that would be around 1991,
yeah,
92, somewhere in there. And yeah, and that's how it all started. And so I would just compose like whatever I could, That drum machine is so hard to program compared to today.
yeah. I guess, but there were harder ones back then.
Yeah, there
That's
were.
that was one drum machine. I think I told you to get it.
Yeah, I think
Okay,
so.
that there was the Alesis drum machine. There was a more advanced Boss drum machine that was
hmm
impossible, and then there was well, the one that you got. I could figure out, and I figured if I could figure it out, and I'm a complete, I'm not. Let's just say that technology is not my forte, but I figured it out because we
Sure.
have to.
hmm
Especially then, I didn't drum at all. But yes,
Right.
you got started with it, and you started out. What were you? What kind of stuff were you recording?
It was pretty just simple stuff, I was just trying to write little tracks or whatever, and particularly, it wasn't anything good, I was just trying to figure it out. I remember trying to program drum patterns in it, and then like you would have to do something to get it to repeat and then go to a B pattern, and it was pretty simple, I guess, but just compared to today where you can look at the screen,
Oh yeah, yeah.
it's just so
Everything
different.
is easier now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But so I started with that, and I don't even really remember. I just remember, you've got 4 tracks obviously, and so you really had to
Work with
make.
limitations.
Yeah, you had to really work with limitations, and you know, and it was never something I took seriously. And then, I mean, I took it seriously, but I would say like I never wanted to be an engineer or
Oh yeah,
anything.
yeah. It's
Nothing,
probably
nothing.
good that you didn't take it all seriously. Like
Yeah,
it's
it
still
was just,
fun.
it was a fun thing. Yeah.
It's like a curiosity kind of thing.
So then later on, when I moved to Los Angeles in 1995, and to go to Musicians Institute, I took the 4-track with me, and I kept doing the same thing, but instead of the drum machine at that time, I think I got a QY20 or 22,
Okay.
and so that had like pre-existing patterns in it, and you could have chords, and then it was like, oh cool, I can just do all this, I can do everything in the QY22, and then I can make up my own melodies, or and start kind of writing that way. So
Okay.
I started doing that, and also I used the 4-track for practice and guitar a lot. I would record myself playing with records, and it was kind of like a thing of checking your timing and all your timing
Yeah.
and feel, and so I used it for that a lot. And then I'd say in 97 I got my first computer, and that was it was a PC, and it just didn't work right. I could not get it to work right. I had Cubase at the time, very primitive version, um, and I just couldn't get
Do
it
what
to
you needed
function.
to do.
Yeah. So finally, I would say around 1999, maybe 98, a friend of mine gave me Logic for the PC. Um, and then that actually worked pretty well. So then I started figuring out Logic that early, and then
This is pre-Apple.
it is well, I wish I'd started with an Apple, but um, in 2000 I did buy my first Apple, which was a G4.
In other words, your first Logic platform was before Apple. When did Apple buy Logic?
They bought Logic in 2004.
Okay.
It was owned by eMagic before then,
Okay.
and so when I got the Apple, the G4, that was when everything just started working really well.
Okay.
Just everything worked. There was no problems. There were so many problems with the PC. I thought the PC was good at the time, but no, I was wrong. It was you would I would burn hard drives out, and just all kinds of hardware failures. And but the G4, I don't like. I always think back about my different Apple computers. There's very few times I've ever had to take them in for any problems.
Hmm.
So they're usually really solid, and I'm sure PCs these days are much better too. I mean,
Hmm.
this was a thing of the technology being so
The
new at
time,
that
yeah.
time. But yeah, so I was always doing the same thing. Then I would write these little tracks that were 2-3 minutes long. Was never really sure what I was doing it for,
Yeah.
and I just built up like a bunch of tracks. A lot of them were covers and things of different songs, so there wasn't anything I could really do with those. But and then I guess in 2003, somebody I was working with said, "Why aren't you doing music for TV and film?" And I said, "Well, I have no idea what that means. Like,
Mm.
what do you do there?" I said, "I don't want to be a composer. I don't want to compose and all that kind of stuff." And he said, "No, no." He's like, "You just write songs and tracks, and you get them with a music library, and they'll put them in TV shows or whatever." And I was, wow, I didn't even know you could do
This
something like
existed.
that. Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah. What do you mean you don't want to be a composer? Because that's what you are.
Yeah, well, I did. Well,
Your
I mean,
concept of composing, you don't want to be that guy that breaks out his quill pen and.
well, it's also like I don't want to be John Williams or whatever.
Oh, gotcha.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
Yeah.
he's obviously one of the best, but that just isn't what I wanted to do. I just didn't that I never even considered doing something like
Yeah.
that. So, and I didn't want to score for things either. I didn't want to score TV shows, or that just doesn't. I don't know. It's cool, and much respect to those that do it. I can't do it, but
Yeah.
it's it just
Your
isn't.
your heart's not there. I'm sure you could do it, whatever you set your mind to, but
Yeah, I
your
just
heart
didn't
has to
want to.
be into it.
I didn't want to do that,
Yeah.
So I like actually writing tracks and songs and placing them in those shows, or in most cases having
Yeah.
somebody else place them.
These little vignettes of sounds from different styles. We should note that also you were at Musicians Institute, which you
Yes,
learned you just studied music and studied all kinds of music. It wasn't any one kind
yes.
of kind of thing that you just
I did the bachelor program, so I was there from 95 to 1999. And that was a really interesting time at that school because when I when I first showed up, there were people there who would never be there again. Joe DiOrio and Ron Eschte and some other just legends of
yeah
jazz. So that was amazing.
yeah.
And actually, Joe DiOrio just died,
That's it. You just passed.
unfortunately. Um, I mean, that was an amazing time to be there.
Hmm.
And it was also an amazing time where they were showing people how to, work with computers there.
Yeah,
And that
which
was
was relatively new.
very new.
Yes.
Yeah, very new. And so I learned a little bit of that. And then, I mean, at the time, there weren't really even plugins, like there weren't software synths. Um, so I'm talking around like 97. But yeah, like it was all like you had to chain it out to MIDI hardware units, way more complicated.
Yeah.
Um, which now that's definitely, I guess it exists, but it's mostly a thing of the past.
Yeah.
So that was the one really different thing back then. And but yeah, I definitely learned a lot there. And in the bachelor's program, you had to take like engineering classes, and I didn't have any idea what was going on. It was like a crash course,
Yeah.
and they were showing you like a huge mixing console. I forget which one it was, but it wasn't like it wasn't.
Wasn't an Eve.
I don't think it was a Neve. I want to say it was an SSL, um, but I'm not sure. It's been too long.
Yeah.
But they had two studios there at the time. I think they have more now. Um, but it wasn't the kind of thing like mixing in Logic. Definitely, I didn't learn that there.
Yeah.
That came later.
Yeah. So they helped with some of the base knowledge that helped. They opened your mind up to the Logic stuff.
Definitely, and they had they had ADAT machines there too, and
That's probably the end, near the end of ADAT.
that was right at the end of it. I never used an ADAT machine while I was there. The recording class I took, the recording class there, we would change every year, and by the time I took it, ADATs were kind of on the way out there.
Yeah.
So, but if I had taken it 1 year earlier, I would have had the ADATs.
Yeah.
And there was a couple situations where I transferred things on ADATs, but I didn't. It was more it was more like I handed somebody an ADAT and they put something on there, and it wasn't like I didn't know how to use them at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was right at the tail end of those, and the mixing and all that kind of stuff that came later when I actually needed to know how to do it. I had to figure it out basically.
Yeah. Trial by fire.
Definitely.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
So you learning all this kind of music, you're exposed to all this different culture because you're from Southern Pennsylvania. Not to say that obviously there's culture there,
Sure.
but you go to Los Angeles, California, and part of being at college, one of the cool parts of being at college is you get to see people, especially at the college you went to, from all over the world.
Yes,
Exchange of ideas, exchange of sounds, exchange of influences.
there were so many people there, from
Yeah.
Europe and Japan and all over the world. And yeah, you really got to meet a lot of really cool people. And it's a great school. Just I'm sure Berkeley is just as amazing. And there's other music college. Any situation like that is amazing.
Yes. So somewhere along the line, so you're this friend you this person you befriended, and he told you to consider composing music, but putting tracks down and selling it. Uh, this becomes one of your things that this is what I want to do. This is what I this is what I want to work up towards. So
Definitely.
you can compose the modern day composer in a lot of ways is not the guy with the quill pen. It's the guy
Right.
it's the guy with musical ideas and uh, recording knowledge.
Yeah.
Okay, so this leads up to Beat Chamber.
Yeah.
So when did Beat Chamber start?
So in 2000, around 2003, I started putting together tracks, and this would be for the eventual goal of something. I'm not really sure what at that time. And my my longtime friend from Musicians Institute, Danny Osuna, we were in the exact same classes. Um, he'd already been doing music for TV and film. And I never really knew exactly what he did, but he worked for a company that did Latin music in Los Angeles. And he started as an intern, but he had a head start on everybody in our class doing this kind of stuff. He was probably interning before he was even out of school.
Okay.
Um, so
What nationality is he?
he's from Texas, but he is Mexican.
Okay.
He was born in Texas, but he's very very
North
familiar.
North Mexico.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, he's very like he has a great handle on all the Latin styles,
Yes.
and he has a great handle on music in general. He
Yeah.
he was always very very good at everything he did in school.
Yeah.
Um, so so he took me out to dinner in 2004, and he said, "Hey," he's like, "you've got all these tracks. We should start our own library." And I was like, "Wow!" It was that moment where you knew that's what you were supposed to do, and that was it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was strong. There's no two ways about it. Um, I told you this before, but I'll tell it again. I was in a pretty bad marriage at the time, and my ex-wife gave me an ultimatum. She said, "Well, if you're going to do that, we have to get divorced," which was just crazy. And I was like, "Okay, cool." And that was it. So we we went for one therapy session, and it was obvious that this was not going to work, and that was the end of it. uh, I had no problem with that being an ultimate that ultimatum turned out
Maybe
to be,
the ultimatum is what you needed.
it was exactly what I needed.
Yeah.
I'm thankful that that happened. And so I got my own place in Woodland Hills, California, which is where I lived from 2004 to 2012. And that was what I did. We started Beat Chamber. It was very slow at first. So I still did other things. I built guitar pedals for a long time. I taught students. You know, I'd been doing that all along too, and
You did some
but
work at Musicians Institute.
a little bit, yeah. I was a
Yeah.
teacher's assistant there
Yeah.
from. I actually left Musicians Institute in 2004 as well, but I'd been there since 1999.
Yeah.
When I graduated, I was hired as a teacher's assistant, but I didn't do a whole lot there. I did about two classes a week, and I would just help the teachers basically. But or you would play. I would play guitar for like at some of the drum classes. That's basically what it was.
Hmm.
Um, but that was great. You know, that was a good time even to be there, even in that capacity then.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so we started in 2004, Beat Chamber. There wasn't a whole lot going on right away. We were just building up a catalog, and I think we built it up to about 60 tracks at first. And at some point, I forget what it was when it was. Somebody I knew hired us to do a couple of commercials. Um, I was working at a place called Royer Labs at the time. And one of the guys that worked at the other company called Mojave Audio, he hired me to do a commercial. And I think it was for The Shield, which was an old police show at the time.
Okay.
And then he hired me to do a couple more, and I would start bringing Danny in to do stuff on some of those.
Hmm.
Um, and I would say in 2007, one or two of our tracks from that 60 to 100 track catalog we had got started getting used. We had signed like a small deal at the time, and I think one of my first, I think my actual first placement on a TV show was in the first season of the Kardashian show,
Okay.
and at least that was the first one I knew about. Because sometimes you don't know right away. A lot of times when you get a placement on reality show, they don't pay you like an upfront fee, so you'll find out on your royalty statement
Okay.
about 9 to 10 months after the fact.
Okay.
So, um, so that was kind of that was, I would say that's how it kind of started getting busy, and we just
Did
started
you
getting.
both had you both had work on the side? Like you work at Warrior Labs and Danny? Well,
Danny was still working at this Latin music company at that
okay.
time.
Okay.
So, and he would, and I think both of us, we would take recording clients every now and then, people that wanted to record whatever. So that was like some of the side work at the time. Um, LA's expensive, so you have to, you have to have, you really got to have something else going on there.
I understand. Yeah.
It's a pricey place to live, but yeah, that was, we would meet at night and or on our days off and take care of things. And a lot of it was kind of boring. Like some of it we would go down to the city and you know you had to file for your business licenses and all that stuff. I mean, there was a lot of that stuff that just isn't the glory
Oh
and
yeah. That's
you
what
know
we every day. You got to set yourself up.
yeah.
Business
So
wise, you just can't be it's just not all rocking all day long. It's like
right. So yeah, there was a lot of that, and then I think the next breakthrough was when we started getting music on Burn Notice.
okay.
And that did start in 2008, but it really started a lot heavier in 2010.
Okay.
And that was a great show. And it was a great show for Beat Chamber. I think we had 24 songs throughout that whole series.
Hmm.
Um, and that was fantastic. And then around 2012, right at the end, I moved back to the East Coast, and so yeah, and but it's continued. I've the internet makes everything like that possible.
Yeah.
And we had already, I'm missing a lot of things in there. There's other things that happen, so feel free to ask other
Yes.
questions. But we had a lot of connections built up at that point,
Hmm.
and once you get a certain amount of credits, you don't really have to,
The
you know,
hustle isn't as hard.
yeah,
The climb isn't as hard.
yeah, you can send your music out and to other people you don't know, and you can get things happening, you know, with a cold email. Whereas if you'd never done anything before, like a cold email would be, it would be difficult, you know, to get something happening.
Establishing yourself.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
B Chamber, what it with Burn Notice, it was some rock and metal and then Latin.
It was all of the above
All
because
of the above.
it was kind of a, I think it was a Miami show, if I
Yeah.
remember right. So they'd use everything from heavy metal, rock, to reggaeton, to traditional Latin.
Yeah.
We had a lot of different styles on that show.
So that's a part of your gig is like having to you're a composer of all different kinds of grooves and all different kinds of cultural kind of music between you and Danny.
Absolutely,
It's like,
yeah. There were things that he doesn't enjoy doing that I enjoyed more, styles,
yeah,
and vice versa.
yeah,
So there was a, but between the two of us, we put together a lot of different stuff that
yeah.
worked pretty well
What
for
does
the
Danny
band.
play?
Instrument,
Yeah.
he plays guitar too,
Okay.
and that would be his main instrument. But he plays other things. He
Okay.
plays bass.
It's a normal thing in that now for people to be just multi instrumentalist.
Yeah, and he also he there's lots of guitar type instruments in the Latin world, like Cuban tres and the Baja Quinto, things like that. That as guitar players, you know, they're not that hard. They're not that crazy to play,
Yeah,
but they don't
learning
sound
curve
any.
isn't that steep.
Yeah, and they don't, the way you play them, they don't sound anything like a guitar, you know.
Yeah,
So it's
it's
they're pretty
it's
cool instruments.
the physical act of doing it is not probably the weird part. It's being in the culture. In other words, having the culture in your trying to grab the culture
Exactly.
that the music that you're trying to
Exactly.
replicate replicate.
Yeah.
So so then we get into some like well, hip hop has always been a thing.
Sure.
Hip
Yeah.
hop has always been a which borrows from everything as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So so what are you doing these days? What are you writing? Some of the people that you're writing for these days.
It's pretty much the same thing. I mean, we have the same connections and one or two more, and they'll just reach out every now and then and say, "Hey, we need some more whatever. We need some more of this, we need some more of that." And music's pretty saturated these days too. There's a lot of all these things out there. Um, I'd say at this point we know it works. You know, we know I know if I bring somebody in to work with on some Latin stuff, I know that's gonna get taken by somebody and eventually
Yeah.
used. So that was one of the things too when I moved back here. I had to kind of do a deep dive on finding people that I could work with,
Yeah.
and I found I found a really good um, a guy in Baltimore that's great,
Okay.
and it's funny.
So
He's act
let's talk about your production. Like this is part of the
Sure.
you're a producer for like in Beat Chamber, you essentially are a producer, composer, you know, you do all of it. So what is production? How does production look like in that in that thing where you were talking about you have a stable of people that you can
Sure.
collaborate with?
It looks like this. I'll write a track. Um, Sometimes I write it with somebody else in mind. Sometimes I'll write an instrumental track and I'll adjust it later. Meaning, like, sometimes an instrumental track, you don't have the traditional verse chorus form.
Yeah,
Um, but sometimes I'll adjust that later and I'll send it to I'll email it to somebody I work with. And, sometimes I'll email them. Usually it's like I'll email them 3 to 5 tracks. Um, and we work out whatever deal we have to work out. Our deal is usually exactly the same, what we pay people, and then contracts and all that stuff too. And then they'll typically write to the track on their own. They don't come in and write with me, but when they're ready, they'll let me know. We'll schedule a session, and then they'll come in and record, and we'll record all these tracks, and then they're paid, their job is done basically. But at that point, then I have to dig into all the vocals, edit things, find the best takes, possibly tune things. Um,
probably tune things.
prop, yeah,
And now, this is not taking anything away from anybody,
right.
but we live in a world that doesn't understand what voices sound like without being adjusted.
Yeah, it's pretty much everything is tuned. Um, yeah, and I'm not an auto tune guy. I don't really care for that too much.
Yeah,
I've always used Melodyne,
yeah,
because it's just a lot more natural sounding to
yeah.
me. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah,
you're working
that's
with you still working with Logic, or
still work with Logic. Yeah.
did you ever go Pro Tools?
I've had Pro Tools at certain times and I would use it for stems and things, but I always gravitated back towards Logic.
Okay.
Nothing against Pro Tools. I just never got used to it.
Yeah.
And now on my latest, I got a new computer last year. I'm not, I could get Pro Tools, but I think it's like subscription based now, and I just don't think I'd use it enough to
Warrant the
justify.
subscription.
What's that?
To warrant the subscription.
Yeah, I don't think it's worth it for me. So, and I don't have anybody demanding I use Pro Tools. So, Logic to me has always been the thing. Um, I wanted to learn Ableton at one point too, and I actually bought it, but it looks so different that I never got it. I never got it together.
Yeah.
Um, but um, but yeah, Logic. I still use Logic, and once the singer, rapper, whoever, once they go home, I just produce the track from there.
Do
Tuning.
you have some sort of lyric content you have in mind?
Oh, that's a good question. Absolutely. Yeah. There's certain pitfalls with lyrics and things that we definitely want to avoid. Um, and for TV and film, definitely you want to avoid all the cursing possible. That can definitely
Yeah.
turn people off, or just it wouldn't be able to be on TV. Um, and yeah, the subjects have to be a little more general. You don't want to get too specific in the lyric content, because that can be a problem too.
Yeah.
So there are times I'll write lyrics, and that does happen. But usually it's me at the end, kind of guiding things along, and I'll say, "Oh, yeah, I don't really like this phrase. Like, let's change that." Things like that. But of course, if it's somebody in Spanish,
Yeah, I was going to say that has to be challenging.
I don't. Yeah, in that case, I have to. That's why I only have a certain amount of people I work with, because I have to really trust them
Yeah.
to do these things, and plus I need them to, at the end of the when it's all over, I need them to write out all the translations for whatever catalog we're gonna put these songs in.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah. So in that case, I just have to trust certain people. But I have a couple people I trust to do that.
Yeah.
And anyway, yeah. So Melodyne, tighten up the vocals, add any instruments I want to add, mix the stuff.
Mhm.
That's an interesting process too. We can talk about that. And and then once the mix is really sounding good, then I'll master it.
Okay.
And we generally just do that ourselves, just because of cost.
Yeah.
But I've had other people master my music before, and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
That's something I wish I could afford
Yeah, all the
more,
time. Yeah.
but it's pretty cost prohibitive for
Yeah.
the stuff we do.
Yeah. So mixing, I'm surprised. Like when I do my own things in Logic. Okay, so a lot of my stuff is guitar based. How low actually in the mix the guitars are?
Yes.
When I am mixing, it's like they're like down to one or two. They're not
Well,
that loud because everything can't be up as full blast all the time, and this is true with mixing in general, not just.
with mixing, like, I know that's what you wanted to talk about that a little bit,
Yeah.
and I definitely have a few tips on that. I live in a older house, so and this room was obviously never intended for that. So the acoustic panels and all that stuff, that's a real good idea. And I don't know if you can see behind me, but on both corners, I do have corner traps
Okay.
in here. And then I've built my own panels, 2x4 or 2x8, and then I put Roxel RHT80 in them, which is, you can get that at an insulation store,
Okay.
um, and not Home Depot, unfortunately. They don't sell it, but it absorbs bass frequencies really, really well.
Okay.
And so it'll definitely quiet your room down, so there's not a lot of reflections. And I've put a lot of panels up in here, but I still don't know what I'm doing. I'm not an expert
Like
by any means.
acoustics.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at, So I've had good monitors, speakers. Um, I had KRK V8s for the longest time, and I still like those. And now I'm using these Atom A7Xs. But here's the one thing I can tell you for mixing that's huge, even if you don't have acoustic panels, is to get a room correction software. And there's one by Sonar where everybody likes. And basically you put a microphone in front of your speakers, and it'll kind of, I don't know what it does, but it evaluates your room, and it puts an EQ curve on your speakers. um, it's an adjustment, so it basically fixes a lot of the problems. So when you mix in your room that's not perfect, neither is mine,
Yeah.
when you go out to the car, it's not going to sound like a disaster.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. Now, I don't use SonarWorks all the time.
Yeah.
The one that I've actually found,
These are plugins for Logic.
yes, they could be for anything. They could be for Pro Tools,
Okay.
and SonarWorks actually has what's called a system-wide plugin
Okay.
that it'll work for your music from iTunes and everything. As a matter of fact, I think mine is running right now. It runs all the time, basically. But the one that have used is the IK Multimedia ARC system, and I don't know why I like it better than the Sonar Works when I mix. It
Okay.
just seems like it just seemed, maybe the microphone it came with got my room a little bit better.
Okay.
But that was, there's certain things in the whole recording thing that are game changers. And for years I would have that frustrating thing of, I would do a mix and I'd take it to the car and it wasn't quite right. And then you got to sit there, you got to take all these notes on things, You come back into your room, you you mix it with those things in mind, but it doesn't sound great in your room because your room is screwed up.
Yeah.
Then you take it back out to the car, it's like you're getting closer, or maybe you nailed it. But when I started using the ARC system, I did the mix how I thought it should sound in my room, and I took it to the car, and it was perfect. And that to me was amazing.
Okay.
And I cannot recommend that high
The arc.
enough.
How do you spell arc?
ARC,
Okay.
ARC system, and it's by IK Multimedia. Or there's the Sonar Works one. I forget the name of. I don't know what the actual name of the product is,
Huh?
but they're both packages. They come with software and a measuring microphone, and that is huge. And from what I've heard, the if you have acoustic panels in your room, that definitely helps. But it really it'll work even if you don't have a room that's set up at all. It may not work perfect, but it'll work to some. It'll definitely make things better.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I can't recommend those enough. Those are
That is like person in my position, where my recording studio is my living room. My music, like I don't have all the the stuff on the ceiling and like
sure.
even what you have on your walls. That is something that's absolutely that gets you closer to being perfect.
Yes, but
Yes,
also just having a lot of furniture and other things in your room
which I do.
that helps.
Yeah.
Definitely that helps. Things like bookshelves behind your speakers,
Okay.
that helps.
Okay.
It's kind of that uneven, all the different book shapes,
Yeah.
that can really help. Um, but yeah, definitely either the Arc system or Sonar
I see those
works.
padded things that are of different shapes and sizes in different studios. It's an acoustic thing. You
Yeah,
that
those
is
are okay. Those are okay.
kind of like the books.
Do you mean the
Yeah.
foam things?
Hmm.
Yeah, the foam things are, from what I've heard, those are mostly for like the high frequencies.
Hmm.
They don't do much for the low frequencies.
Okay.
And again, I'm an idiot. This is just what I've heard, you
Yes.
know. So I don't have any of those in my room here, but I do have them on my. I do have them in a. I have like a vocal booth kind of area in my basement where I, or like an
You still break
isolated
out
space.
the Marshall amplifiers and record. Uh,
I still have those, but I mostly use my Kemper these
okay.
days, and um, I yeah, I do have some nice amps,
Okay.
but honestly, I should plug them in. I have a nice Marshall, I've got a nice Fender, I've got a nice Bogner, and I just don't use them anymore. I use my Kemper all the time,
Uh,
and because it just sounds so good, which is another game changer. The
yes.
Kemper or anything similar,
Yes.
the Axe
Yeah.
effects. Or, there's a couple other ones out there.
Yeah.
Those are just
We
phenomenal.
endorse Kemper.
Yeah, Kemper's good. Kemper's good. I love. I've I cannot say enough good things about it.
Yeah. Yes. Well, thank you, Jonathan. So,
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
what do you have in store for you in the future? What is going on?
Uh,
What are you doing
I
now?
I have about 20 songs recorded at the moment with different artists,
Hmm.
and I'm just sorting through the
Yep.
tuning right
Getting
now.
back to some rock stuff. So you did hip hop, you did the Spanish music, you did the reggae, or did the reggaetron, or whatever the.
Yeah, I've done some, yeah, reggaeton.
Well, well,
I
but
yeah,
getting back to some of the rock stuff too.
yeah. Hopefully, I'll be doing a little bit more of that this year,
Yeah,
and but I'm definitely, yeah. I have about 20 songs right now that are all recorded with different artists, and I'm just trying to sort through the editing process
I
right
got you.
now, and then tuning, and then I'll probably add a few more instruments on the songs, and then I'll be mixing.
What are the weirdest instruments you would add? Are they mostly a lot of MIDI instruments, or is it?
So,
Or
sometimes, yeah,
or do
there's
you have any strange guitarish kind of?
interesting MIDI stuff, but some of the ones I have a few strange ones. I have a Jeff Hostetter made me a custom Cuban tress,
Okay.
which is great. He did such a good job on that. So that's it's basically just it was just a Martin Mini, and it's like three strings, but it's a double. It's like a double string
Yeah.
each, and so that's interesting. I have a Bajo Quinto, which is interesting,
Uh-huh.
which is like a Mexican kind of guitar.
Yep.
It's very interesting, and that's about. And I have ukuleles, and I have a really busted up mandolin that I've never tried to record, but I would say the Latin ones are kind of the weirder ones I
Which is
have.
fun.
Yeah, those are
That's what's
fun.
fun.
Yeah, and you can actually. What's funny about the Cuban tress is you can actually, if you do it right, you can get a 12-string guitar to sound pretty close to that.
Okay.
So I've
I
done that
got
a
a
few.
Nashville tune guitar.
Oh, nice.
I don't.
I have one of those too.
Yeah.
I have that sounds really good mixed in
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
That's a the cool thing about the Nashville tuning is you can record that one on its own, and then you can pan it around where you want it in the mix.
Yeah.
Which is the unfortunate thing about a 12-string guitar. If you record that, it's all going to stay in the same place. So, but
Yeah.
yeah,
And it honestly, it sounds different.
yeah, it does. It does. But yeah, that's the advantage. I think there was somebody that helped me out with mixing a long time ago, and he told me about the Nashville tuning,
Mhm.
and he said, "Yeah, do the Nashville tuning, not the 12-string thing,
Yeah.
because he said then you can pan it around wherever you want in the mix and
Yeah.
even double it, and
Yeah.
it's a really great sound."
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Thank you, everybody. Till next time.